Hi everybody, welcome to this PASIC presentation on sustainability, cricket clear clothing and apparel. And this is we're going to really focus here on the findings from a stakeholder workshop we organised. I'm Martin Charter from the Centre for Sustainable Design at Business School for Creative Industries. And my co-host today is Chris Whitaker from BASIS.
Thanks, Martin. Yes, I'm the chair of BASIS. That's the British Association for Sustainable Sport. And for those of you who don't know BASIS, we're essentially a trade body, if you like, that brings lots of different organizations and obviously sporting, in particular sporting groups together in order to discuss sustainability. And this forms part of the kind of work that we do. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Chris. Yeah, so, I mean, what BASIS and UCA have come together is to launch this platform for accelerating sustainable innovation in cricket. And the goal for this platform really is to disseminate new ideas and research and sort of catalyze innovation, bringing different people together. So this is sort of part of the process that we're trying to put forward with PASIC. So cricket itself and the business of cricket, the sport of cricket is a simple game on a basic level. It's about a bat and a ball, but it's also a complex game with multiple stakeholders involved in at different levels. And it is the second biggest sport behind football, 1 billion fans around the world, more than 300 million participants according to the ICC, which I think is a large part in Asia, average age 34, and a significant proportion of the fans are women, but also and girls, and we see women and girls sector of the game growing. In the UK or in England specifically, we have seen a bit of a sort of plateauing of the numbers over the last couple of years. But I understand that the 2021 figures showed a bit of an increase in participation. But an area which also we are seeing, a significant level of engagement is in 11 to 8-year-olds through various programs that the ECB are running, such as Dynamos. And so there's over 100,000 kids participated in various programs in 2021. And actually this age group are the first age group that have grown up as being so-called digital natives, but also grown up with climate change. So how this then passes through as they become, teenagers, and they start to sort of get involved in the game as sort of players in clubs and start to buy, equipment, etc. Whether that is going to be something that factored in is a question. We certainly have seen with Generation Z, which are those that are 25 and under, the general surveys that have been done on this have shown that the Generation Z is more concerned about sustainability issues, and they are often bringing, some elements into their decision making, whether as consumers or in other areas. So again, how this follows through, particularly with new younger generation players, is interesting. Cricket itself, from our research, we've perhaps identified as one of the most, from a user perspective or a player perspective, one of the most gear intensive sectors, and some sort of rudimentary research we've done looking at different aspects of playing equipment and down to a range of elements related to equipment. It's perhaps over 40 pieces of equipment that one could utilize. And clearly, if you're playing the game, there's an element in any equipment or apparel or clothing, performance is important. but also of growing importance and a growing discussion item being brought up by people like Matt Pryor in the UK and others is the cost of the game, or the cost of buying the equipment, participating, coaching, etc., etc. So that cost issue is becoming, getting more sort of airtime, if you like. What we also have is, we're in this sort of turning point in a sense of the tradition and heritage of cricket versus innovation, and how the game is changing, with particularly the white ball growing importance, and in England the launch of the 100. But we have seen climate change emerging as a topic being brought forward by BASIS themselves, but also we've had recent activity from players in Australia, and in the UK we have Joe Clark, who's a professional player at Glamorgan, has been very visible in his awareness raising around climate change. But the area perhaps that's received less focus is around circular economy, around sort of reuse, repair, refurbishment of cricket gear. And we'll touch on that a bit later. So indeed, BASIS produced this report and have done other activity around climate change and cricket. And the team at BASIS brought in a number of well-respected scientists to analyze some of the climate change implications of for cricket going forward, which may include issues to do with temperature rise and how cricket clothing particularly will need to change. And we've also recently seen Pat Cummins and a number of the male and female Australian test players come out and back climate change, or Cricket for Climate initiative, initially in Australia, but that's all sort of interestingly come from the players. So, and I guess a lot of these, the younger players now are perhaps have young families, and maybe we've got this sort of thinking about future generations issue, plus Australia with the bushfires over the last sort of year or so. So climate change is an issue, starting to emerge and hitting the media. But emerging from our workshop, we had a number of sort of key topics emerging. And those are breaking these down into sort of business and innovation, supply chains, and circular economy. So firstly, cricket gear and clothing is a business. If we look at those numbers and people playing the game, there is a lot of kit that is used, and there are a range of commercial suppliers of cricket equipment. As we touched on a little bit earlier, we are, out of a time where, there's growing questions around, test cricket versus white ball cricket, or, the emergence of 2020, 2010, 100. So there is this sort of change going on in the sector that's come to the fore more and more so over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, particularly with the advent of the IPL and a number of the other 2020 leagues. So this sort of growing issues around white ball, red ball, and now even day night, and bringing in pink ball cricket, or cricket balls, to allow the one to play at different times through into the evening. And again, we have the emergence of the 100 last year, with a bit chalk and cheese type of discussion, but I think it's been acknowledged that it did get numbers out, and particularly it did gain a lot of benefit for the women's game. And indeed, the participation in the women's and girls' game is growing, and this is a sort of an issue for the future. and indeed, games are now being broadcast, and a lot more interest in the the number of people participating or also attending the games is growing. So, this sort of point of, the old way, Test cricket, county cricket versus the new way, 2010, 25, who knows? But is there a middle way where both the tradition and the innovation will need to coexist going forward? But certainly tradition, as it impacts on cricket gear, in the UK, the Heritage Craft Association, they produce an annual or biannual review of craft products that are, the status of craft products. And essentially, they've analysed a number of cricket items, and indeed hand-stitched cricket balls are now extinct in the UK. They are not produced in the UK. And indeed, they've defined cricket bat manufacturers an endangered species, in the fact that there are really, I think from memory, they were saying about 20 to 30 manufacturers of cricket bats in the UK. I mean, one of the aspects that we've also found, it's perhaps not as straightforward as that, because a number of the clefts, willow clefts are sort of grown and cut in the UK, but then they're distributed to Asia, to India, Pakistan, where they're assembled with the handle and finished, with adding the rubber grips and the rubber in the handles, for example. So you've sort of got a global supply chain on the bats there. And as I mentioned there, you have these sort of tremendous craft skills that still exist in the business, but they are also endangered, and a number of the people, your craftsmen making the bats may be getting older. I spoke to one of the bat manufacturers when we ran the stakeholder meeting, trying to encourage him to attend, and from memory, he highlighted he was in his early 70s, and then I said, well, maybe one of your younger colleagues could join the stakeholder meeting. He said, well, yes, but that the next the next youngest person was about 65. So you've got this sort of issue, maybe literally some of the expertise and skills may die off if we don't look to protect them. So is there an opportunity there for apprenticeships and sort of academies to retain those skills? And indeed, should we be looking to bring those skills back to the UK and actually develop a stronger sort of, let's call it, indigenous cricket gear and clothing sector within the UK? We have seen innovation over the years in cricket bats, particularly, from scoops to jumbos to mongooses, etc., etc. And there's Barry Richards comparing, the old star with the new star with more wood in the blade. And we did have a change in the laws of the game, in terms of specification of bats literally in the MCC laws of the game, where Dennis Lillee did have his aluminium bats that the cricket system decided was not the right type of material, and the laws of the game were changed to specify wood as the material that should be used for bats. But we have had, over the last sort of 18 months ago, the emergence of a prototype bamboo bat produced by Darshil Shah and his team at Cambridge University, and that received a lot of media interest, and they are, as I understand it, sort of taking it into a further sort of development cycle there. But we do have the issues around the within the bamboo bat itself, the analysis they did and the scientific paper they wrote on the production of bamboo bat indicated it had a larger sweet spot. So we do have these challenges over ball versus bat, and you know, maybe in the professional game, maybe it creates too much of an imbalance, but maybe in the youth game or in the women's game, maybe there is an opportunity. And in discussing with some people from the industry, you know, we were actually asking the question, if somebody did decide to use a bamboo bat in a sort of a league game, what's there to stop somebody doing that? So whilst there are the laws of the game, you know, there is a sort of a bit of uncertainty about what's stopping innovations being tested or used in sort of the amateur market. There are a series of standards in the sector for balls, for helmets and other protective equipment, but they're very old, and maybe there is an opportunity to look at those again and bring that up to date, particularly in terms of some of the issues being discussed in the sector at the moment. We did have other innovation emerged where Grays Nichols developed some offcut gloves that use production offcuts, but these contravened at ICC law around use of number of colours, and they were in effect banned. So we do have also these sort of slightly perverse barriers to innovation that emerge in the sector. So, you know, are we at this sort of crossroads between the heritage and innovation where we are? We might start to see opportunities for innovation. And perhaps an area might be, there is a lot of leather used in gloves or pads, and even in boots in some instances, or shoes. And could there be an opportunity to experiment, for example, with vegan leather? And vegan leather, comes in various sort of shapes and sizes and in different types of fibers. And there's a number of sort of showcase products have been produced. This is Pinatex fibers being used in a vegan leather with a Nike product, as I understand it. And this is Milo. It's a mushroom-based leather that was used in a sort of showcase product. But what seemed to be happening with a number of these renewable fibers and even some of the vegan leathers, they're starting to move from the sort of lab into, sources of supply being now, or longer term sources of supply being secured, which will enable more at a higher volume production. We also have on the sort of technical materials side, you have EcoNile, which is a second life fiber, produced by a company called Aquafil that de and repolymerizes nylon from fishing nets into fibers. This has been used in a variety of clothing and carpets, but we haven't seen this yet used in cricket. If people know about the use of it, please let us know. So supply chains or networks are always, pretty complex. As we've heard earlier, the vast majority of cricket gear appears to be being produced outside of the UK, often in Asia, and that's whether it's South Asia or Southeast Asia. We don't really know too much about the practices that are being used in supply chain management and factory management in the production of cricket gear, and the sort of structure in terms of contract manufacturing or specialist manufacturing. We have the overall sort of value chain, and that's also changing from what we're picking up. And this is, from our initial research over the last sort of 6 or so months, we're finding, the emergence of, for example, e-tailing stores by some of the big brands linked to clubs, particularly for clothing. But, their products are still being sold through bricks and mortar retailers, but there's a sort of change going on there, and also the emergence of platforms outside of the major manufacturers selling cricket gear that is maybe branded and sourced from, contacts in Asia, and even the emergence of a new term that I heard this week, bedroom brands, that are emerging, where people have got a website, got the connections, adding creating a logo and putting that on a sort of white label backed or white label clothing, for example. From an environmental point of view, again, we don't have so much information on the life cycle impacts of the materials into the products, from the growing or extraction of any natural fibers or the production of technical fibers, right through to the sort of the use of the items to the end of life. And I'll touch on that again a little bit later. So we sort of don't really know what happens to a lot of those cricket items, in terms of reuse, repair, et cetera. And certainly in terms of the supply chain, if we take shirts and trousers as an example, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals as a sort of proxy for a number of sort of environmental, social, economic issues, related to the supply chain. We, particularly when we look at, as I say, shirts and trousers, there are issues potentially with the use of dyes and chemicals in factories. How is that being managed? Water pollution, for example. We also have the issues potentially around the washing of clothes, microplastic production. Again, when we go deeper into the supply chain, what are the issues in terms of the workforces? Are there particular practices and policies put into place to sort of protect women in the workforce? Is there health insurance, etc. What about pay? Is there fair pay? So there's a series of issues and questions that we really don't have too many answers to at the moment about what's really going on in the sector. So do we have these huge textile manufacturing factories that may be producing all sorts of different items for all sorts of different brands across all sorts of sectors? Is it sort of reasonably well organized like this or not? I mean, we simply don't have that sort of information. And as a result of the workshop and the presentation by the World Federation of the Sporting Goods Industries, we learned that in football in the 90s, they developed something called the Pledge, which was really to tackle some of those social issues in production, particularly of footballs. And as a result of the WFSGI working with FIFA, they came across and developed a protocol called the Pledge to ensure that a number of those social issues, including the use of child labour, was tackled, and a process was put into place in relation to sort of auditing, ensuring that those issues were tackled. Now, we don't have anything like that as far as we are aware, certainly nothing in the public domain that is there relevant for the cricket gear sector. And what we're seeing, particularly in clothing and clothing and apparel, we're seeing these growing issues around demands for transparency and traceability. Particularly one of the topics, is there's a lot of, for example, cotton grown in China in the Uyghur area. We have a lot of issues in terms of the treatment of the Uyghurs in China. And really, a lot of people are getting concerned that they don't want cotton from that region, because of the human rights issues in their products. So, and this is a growing issue where you're seeing some sort of innovative brands now also opening up and having sort of little videos on workers, that work in their factories to show this is a real, real company with real people, and those people are being treated well. So again, you're seeing different approaches to opening up supply chains being used by sort of manufacturers. So, you know, there is a question mark, you know, is it time for a code of conduct in the sector? But what was fed back to us in the discussions in the workshop is that any sort of code or protocol or whatever it might be called should not duplicate what's out there already that manufacturers are using with suppliers. So, you know, there's some work to be done to sort of think this through and see if it is appropriate for the sector. And in the final section here, looking at, you know, this idea of circular economy. So, you know, a big question is, what is that end of life or the elephant's graveyard for cricket equipment? Where does all the cricket equipment, the helmets, the pads, the gloves, the clothing end up? You know, what happens to it after people, you know, move beyond their first use? There is, you know, I think any of us who've played the game have our own individual stories about reuse and, you know, certain types of gear being reused. I remember playing and we had a tea chest in the corner of the changing room where some guys would put slightly damaged bats or pads. But there'll be many stories. There may be some sort of more active reuse programs in some of the leagues around and some of the communities around the country, but this really hasn't been documented. And linked to the sort of PASIC process and UCA, we have a colleague, Joanna, who is starting a PhD to really investigate some of these reuse and circular economy issues in cricket and football clothing. And anybody that's interested in that, please come back to us and we'll connect you with Joanna. So yeah, what does happen to all the clothing, all the helmets, you know, all the gloves, all the boxes that come to the end of life or end of the first life? Is there a second life? Or, you know, are they going to landfill? Could these be reutilized, repaired, upgraded, and reused again? We do have sort of ad hoc, amusing examples, sort of one-off examples, but, you know, this is, you know, these are one-offs, but yeah, you know, how are, you know, the items being reutilized, or how could they be reutilized? Certainly we picked up the Lord's Taverners have a sports kit recycling scheme, but in our initial research, we understand that this is mainly near first life items or sometimes unsold stock from manufacturers. But we have a whole range of equipment and clothing that are out there, you know, that may have come to the end of first life. Maybe there's a tea stain on it or something that on the pads, or the, you know, a small tear or something with a little bit of repair, or a top, or, you know, that with a little bit of sort of repair or whatever, could be reutilized in inner city areas or places where people are, you know, struggling, particularly at this moment in time, and particularly with the cost of engagement and participation. So could there be, you know, we need to really understand much more about what's happening in terms of reuse and what are the opportunities. And maybe there are some examples that we can learn from that again haven't been documented. This just so happens to be a friend and colleague of mine who developed a football gear reuse scheme in Leicester in the mid-90s, where they collected football shirts and other gear, and these were sent by container to Uganda. And you know, our understanding is some of the reuse schemes, you know, are based on collecting materials for cricket, you know, and sending it to Brazil or Africa or whatever. But is there that reuse market in the UK as well for you know, disadvantaged groups or people are struggling at the moment? So there may be these sorts of examples that, you know, A, haven't been documented in football, and C, haven't been documented in cricket. And what lessons can we learn between the two areas? circular economy itself as a concept and a topic has gained sort of growing interest over the last sort of 8 or so years. And indeed, it's something I've done further work on in sort of in a book, particularly looking at the product side of this. And really the idea of circular economy is it's about reframing the thinking away from waste and thinking about how can we retain value in products, in cricket gear, equipment and clothing. So in the products, the components and the materials. So how can we extend the life of the products, materials and components for as long as possible in economic and social systems? So it's not about waste, it's about value and how can we extend the life. And, you know, with a focus much more on that use phase, how can we get the stuff back? How can we extend the life of the, you know, the equipment? And within the idea of circular economy, there are two sort of systems, the technical system and the biological system. And in reality, there's a middle system, you know, which you've got products that are made using sort of biological nutrients, products that use technical nutrients, but then you've also got products that use both bio and technical nutrients. And essentially, you know, cricket based around a ball and the bat, and we have the issues around, you know, primarily the highest quality material is still seen as English willow. But if we think, you know, 15, 20, 25 years out and think in terms of the scenarios of climate change, you know, and if the game does grow, you know, particularly in other parts of the world, thinking about the US leagues will start in 2020, this year or next year, you know, is there going to be enough willow to satisfy, you know, the demand for bats? So do we actually need to think about, you know, securing the supply or even other types of woods that could be used? And what we do have in cricket is a good news story where, you know, any of us who played and got you know, a bat and got scored some runs, you know, get a little bit damaged. We want to, you know, keep those bats running. So there is repair and refurbishment going on at a basic level of taping, you know, or sending back to a number of the bat manufacturers to repair and to allow a second life or even a third life. And indeed, in talking to one of the bat manufacturers, he said it's quite incredible what the craftsman can do to actually get, you know, from what might be seen as a virtually destroyed bat back to something that is usable. And interestingly, we're seeing various videos online showing, you know, the bat repair process and bat refurbishment process. And one sort of interesting company I picked up in New Zealand called Fantel Cricket Equipment. And they're really providing both this repair and refurbishment service and seem to be have clients from all around the world sending their bats to be repaired or refurbished if they're more significantly damaged. So they've got various, if you look on the little placard there, they've got different styles of or different elements of repair there, which is sort of interesting. But also we do have, particularly in the kids' game, the use of plastic bats. And there is a whole issue about, you know, are plastic bats the most appropriate? You know, could we design those plastic bats to go back into being, you know, new plastic bats? Could we use some of those plastic bats into other polymers that are used in cricket gear? Or, you know, again, going back to the former conversation, maybe bamboo bats might be better for kids' cricket. And we have the sort of dominant polyester, you know, shirts and trousers as a material that is quite, you know, dominant in the sector. But we have seen some experimentation, as we understand. Warwickshire, they have used a bamboo fiber. I think it's a mixed fiber between bamboo fibers and some polyester. So it's this hybrid route, but they've sort of experimented with this and you promoted this from their website. And as part of some of our research, we did a little bit of a behind the scenes study looking at different types of materials and innovation opportunities associated with 5 pieces of equipment. This is still unpublished, but we're looking for sponsors or partners to help us extend this existing initial research to, validate some of our findings and improve that research. So if we, again, anybody on the call is interested to help us move that forward, please let us know. And just focusing in just on, in the end here, the clothing part of this, there's a lot of clothing that is used, whether it's from jumpers through, short sleeve shirts, long sleeve shirts, trousers, etc., etc. And again, as we say, often still in the amateur game, there's a lot of white clothing there. What could we, how could we reutilize the polyester clothing, at the end of first or second life, and are there some of the emerging technologies that are being developed, particularly being trialed around whether it's fiber-based or polymer-based, some of the new recycling technologies that are being trialed in places like the Netherlands. Would this create an opportunity for something in the UK? But we want to see in the professional game, we see, I guess in the minor counties right up to test, and some of the leagues, we see more coloured clothing coming in. And indeed, talking to one of the manufacturers, he mentioned he believed that we would see more coloured clothing coming in. So we've got sort of all sorts of issues in terms of recycling of the coloured clothing or coloured clothing, and how could we design the clothing in a way where the colorants and dyes could be separated in some form to get to the raw materials, because I guess at the moment, it'd be quite difficult to recycle some of this, the colored clothing. And indeed, we also have issues around the clothing. There's increasing discussion around, the types of clothing for the women's market. Do we need to resize, provide a sort of resizing option for women? Are there particular issues, in the women's market the manufacturers need to pick up? Historically, women have had to use, men or boys' clothes, but with the growth of the women's game and the importance of the market, maybe we need to start to think about innovating in that space as well. And we are starting to see new renewable fibers emerge, as I mentioned earlier. On a commercial, level. We have pineapple fibers in development. We have, sorry, the previous slide was banana fibers. We then have pineapple fibers, and then we have bamboo fibers, as I mentioned, that's in the Warwickshire shirts. And indeed, what we've seen very recently, to try and bring together the new emergent entrepreneurs and innovators in this sector, is the launch of something called Fibrel, the Material Alliance sector, where a number of the companies, Pinatex, Bananatex, and others, have got together to produce a sort of alliance of suppliers in this area to sort of start to sort of grow the market. And that's sort of an interesting, very recent development showing the sort of rising visibility of natural fibers. And this isn't a great slide, apologies for this, but this is just as a reminder, PASIC is there to help act as a collaborative platform to catalyze research and innovation. And we do this through webinars like this. We do this through research, and we hope to be able to look at facilitating some projects in some ways going forward. We are still evolving the platform, and we welcome any ideas or any engagement. Please get back to me, and I'll leave an email in the end of this. Get back to myself, or if you or Chris. And just in finishing, at the moment, linked to sort of PASIC, we have a couple of pieces of research going on. looking at the sort of the business of cricket and sustainability opportunities. We've got a specific piece of research looking at sustainability in cricket clothing. And then we have my colleague Joanna's PhD research that's going to go into a lot more detail over the next sort of 2 to 3 years over circularity and cricket clothing. And then we are planning other workshops and other opportunities, other opportunities for people to engage with, as they emerge. And indeed, I think we still have Chris on the line here. So I don't know, Chris, if you wanted to make a couple of comments, in terms of your observations, what you've heard from the presentation, or things you'd like to sort of add.
Thanks, Martin. Really interesting presentation. No, I don't really have too much to add, because I thought you covered really all the issues that have come up over the various forums that we've run over the last almost a year, I suppose now. Certainly the circularity side of things, and the upcycling, recycling and reuse have been something that I know you and I have spoken about quite often, and hopefully there are initiatives we can build out of this. And the use of materials, well, that is an interesting one, and it's something probably we'll be doing a lot more work on and concentrating on specific products. We've seen and we've talked about the testing side of it in terms of whether they're right, fit for purpose in terms of the sorts of role they need to play as a bit of material within something that's a protective type of piece of equipment. So I think there's a lot to build on here. Now I think the PASIC platform can really help us, like you said, drive initiative, and certainly, we hope will encourage perhaps some entrepreneurs to spot an opportunity and work with us on trying to develop some new products and bring them into the market.
Yeah, and I think just sort of building on what Chris is saying, I mean, we're very open to collaborative projects with partners coming in to work with us and to sort of try and find a way to either tackle some of these research gaps or to help develop prototypes. And I think within our network, we've got at least one or a couple of professionals who are interested, are very open to trial some new sustainable innovations. So, and again, Chris and I have discussed as sort of old grey-haired cricketers that, of course, it's a brilliant opportunity in nets to trial all sorts of things. And indeed, one of the things I think there isn't a problem with mentioning this is part of our role as that catalyst is we helped the guys at Cambridge link up with the who developed the bamboo cricket bat with some guys in Ireland who developed a bamboo hurling stick to exchange lessons learned. And one of the big lessons learned there from those guys was not just the technical testing, but it was the testing amongst the users, getting the feedback from players in terms of equipment. So that's already some of the additional things we're doing and hope to do, is to act as this sort of connector between different people and look at, opportunities of innovation in other sectors, into cricket into other areas, and foster a spirit of collaboration.
Which is, and obviously that sits very nicely with BASIS and our role in trying to be a marketplace for sharing ideas, basically, and making sure that we try and, in terms of sustainability, are always slightly ahead of the curve in being able to ensure that we're getting to the right results. So, thanks.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Chris, and thank you very much, everybody, for listening to this. Please get back to us with any questions or areas for observation. and look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.